Hello, everyone. Dr. Anthony Criniti IV here, also known as Dr. Finance. Welcome to the Dr. Finance Live podcast. We have a very special guest today. We have Brandon Webb here. He's a former Navy SEAL instructor, a Navy SEAL instructor. I'm sorry, a Navy SEAL, a former Navy SEAL instructor. Brandon, correct me if I'm wrong here. A multiple New York Times best-selling author. Folks, he's got this new book out here called Steel Fear. And we're going to talk about that today, among so many other things. He's also a successful businessman, and that's why also it's relevant to this show. He's going to teach us a lot about business. So let's give a warm welcome for Brandon. Brandon, welcome. How are you, sir?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me on the show.
You're welcome, sir. And so let's go ahead and get started, Brandon. I know you were doing having some fun this summer, just flying around Europe, and you just got back. So I want to just get to know you a little bit more. Can you tell us a little about yourself, maybe a few moments or so?
Sure. About myself. So I was originally born in Canada. My dad is Canadian. My mom's American. They met in Malibu. He picked her and her girlfriend up hitchhiking in Malibu Canyon. Back when hitchhiking was a thing, and you weren't worried about, getting chopped up and put in someone's freezer. But I spent the first part of my childhood in Canada. It was an amazing experience up in British Columbia, up in the mountains, even east of Whistler, which is just near, I guess the nearest big city would have been Vancouver. My dad lost his first business. He had built a successful construction company. Canada had a financial crisis in the late 70s. He ended up losing everything. We moved to Washington State briefly, found a sailboat for sale in Vancouver. My parents had this dream to sail around the world, so they moved the family on the boat. So my sister, our black cocker spaniel, and my mom and my dad on about a 50-foot ketch, which is a 2-masted sailboat. We lived on that boat for 5 years, sailed it down to California, did some cruising in Mexico. I grew up in that kind of boating world, which is very different from the mountains in skiing in British Columbia, Canada. But it exposed me to my first, I guess my second job. My first job, I was a janitor, which sucked, but I think those jobs build character. I ended up getting an amazing opportunity to be a kind of junior deckhand on a scuba diving boat out of Ventura Harbor. Grew up working on that boat. And then that kind of inspired me to go in the Navy SEAL teams. Fast forward a few years, I was a full paid deckhand at 15 years old, was a rescue diver. My dad says, "Hey, we're gonna do this big sailing trip. We're gonna go, to Australia." And I really didn't want to go. I was at a point in my life where I wanted to do what 15, 16-year-old boys like to do, chase girls, get a driver's license. But I went on this big sailing trip. But I made it to Tahiti, and my dad and I had a big disagreement around how to anchor the boat, among other things. It was seamanship related, and it got pretty intense. And he ended up saying, "Time for you to leave home," in Papeete, Tahiti, when I was 16. So I grabbed a backpack and $200 and left home. My mom was crying, sister was crying, found a boat, headed to Hawaii, hopped on his crew, finished my last year of high school on my own, and joined the Navy to be a SEAL. So that's kind of my background into the SEAL teams. I did 13 years in the Navy, most of that as a Navy SEAL. I deployed to Middle East, Afghanistan right after 9/11. Then went from Afghanistan to instructor duty. I was an advanced sniper instructor. Then I got recruited to be a regular sniper cadre, which is a 3-month sniper program the Navy SEALs have. We're at a point where we were modernizing the course, making it better. So that was an amazing experience. And then got promoted as head instructor, and then kind of hit burnout mode in 2005 and decided I was going to leave the Navy in 2006, which was a little bit not a traditional decision, because usually I was 7 years away from retirement. But like the title of your show says, I started doing the kind of financial calculations and realizing I can make up my retirement, which really the main benefit of the military retirement is medical for life, which unfortunately in America today is a huge benefit because healthcare is ridiculously expensive for an ordinary family to shoulder that financial burden. But I decided, hey, I'm going to leave the Navy, start a business. And that was in 2006. I'll give you the fast forward version, but I started my first startup crashed and burned, which was timed right with the 2008 financial crisis. I ended up working for the defense industry for a couple of years to kind of dust myself off and rebuild my savings. And I at that time I had gone through a divorce and I had responsibilities to my kids, and so I had to go back to take a regular job. But then I started building my digital media business on the side as a side hustle, because I had gotten into writing for magazines, blogging, and I kind of learned digital content through blogging back in 2000. This was 2010, 2011. Then I started my current business in 2012, which I still run today, called SoftRep Media. We own several websites, but our biggest site is softrep.com, and that's a site that covers foreign policy, military news, and domestic security issues, and that's mostly a subscription revenue model. Although we do get a little bit we make some money on ad revenue, and we have a store as well. But yeah, that's me in a nutshell. I actually built a 8-figure e-commerce business off of the SoftRep audience. But it kind of grew too fast for me to handle. It got out of control. We talked about that on your Clubhouse stage a few days ago. But I ended up selling that business in 2020 in the pandemic, which was the right thing to do. We sold to a competitor, and yeah, today I live in Puerto Rico. I travel. As a online business with no office, I'm fortunate enough to be able to travel, spend time with my kids and my family and friends, and more focused on spending a little more, I wouldn't say work-life balance, but just kind of, I spent the first 35 years just really focused on grinding away, and now it's nice to be able to go visit my son in Scotland where he's at university, or Oregon where my other two kids are finishing up high school. But that's a very long introduction. But that gets you caught up to date. Yeah.
That's great. I didn't know you were in Puerto Rico. Wow, that's pretty cool. Brendan Burchard, I don't know if you know him. He's in Puerto Rico too. He's a top influencer.
Yeah, there's a big community down here of influencers, crypto people. Puerto Rico is an amazing island. They passed a law back, I think, in 2012 that was initially called Act 20, Act 22. They've changed it since. I think they call it Act 60 now. But it's just amazing tax law that taxes your main business at 4% flat tax, and you're able to take the majority of your compensation tax-free. There's all sorts of other benefits, but those are like the big ones. And yeah, it's, I think, the best tax optimization you can, if your business meets the requirements, it's the best tax optimization you can have while still maintaining your U.S. passport.
How long have you been in Puerto Rico for?
About 6 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when did, can you talk about when John David Mann entered the picture? John David Mann is your co-author on many of
Yeah.
your books.
Yeah. So I started, I never set out to be a writer. I just one day decided I read something in one of the men's magazines, and I thought, you know what, I can write a short story. And I wrote a short story about Somali pirates and Navy SEAL snipers, and FHM in the UK published it and paid me. And I thought to myself, wow, this is fun. So I started writing, started blogging. Then a good friend of mine, Marcus Luttrell, who was a student of mine, many people know him from his book Lone Survivor, which Mark Wahlberg made into a movie as well. Marcus encouraged me to write a book. He said, you have this crazy story. Your parents were hippies. You grew up on this boat and left home. Like, you should tell your story. So I decided, okay, let me look into it. So it took a while. I eventually got a really good agent, my first agent, Margaret McBride. Margaret introduced me to John. I had written probably most of my memoir, but Margaret wisely told me that, especially with a memoir, getting somebody else to help you write it will pull a lot of interesting facts out of your life that you may think the person writing it may think it's boring, but all that stuff is super interesting to other people. So she said, I want to introduce you to this guy, John. He's an amazing writer. John and I hit it off right away. It was, I think also, you know, he had been writing in a very certain genre, like finance, self-help. And this was interesting to him because it was a pretty radical departure from his typical content. But we hit it off. And I remember we did the Red Circle, which was the first book we did together. And at the end of that project, I told him, I said, I have this idea for this novel. Would you ever be interested in collaborating on fiction, which is very different from nonfiction, from a writing process, at least for me. And he said, well, what are you talking about? And I said, well, before I was a SEAL, I served on the Abraham Lincoln, the aircraft carrier. They were just integrating women into combat roles in the Navy. And we had one of the first female crews on the Abe Lincoln, and we had a sexual predator on the boat, and they never caught the guy. And I said, imagine if it was a serial killer, like a Hannibal Lechter on an aircraft carrier. It's like, I think that makes for an interesting setting. It's got all the elements of like an Agatha Christie closed door murder mystery, but it's on the ship. And so that was the original concept. I started writing the book myself probably, I think 3 years ago. Then I got about a quarter of the way into it. And then I just wanted to get it out there in the world. And so I asked John, I said, hey, I've got this start of a book. Do you want to help me finish it? And I sent it over to him and he's like, I'm in. And the thing is, for novels or any work of fiction, if you want to sell a fictional piece of work, you have to finish it. You can't, like on a nonfiction book, if you and I wanted to write a book about finance, we could draft a couple page proposal, put our biographies in, maybe a little section on marketing, and we could sell that for a probably 6-figure advance to one of the major publishing houses, just off a few pages of proposal, because it's nonfiction. Fiction, you got to turn in the whole piece of work. So you have to do it on your own. And so John and I
didn't know that, Brandon. Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah, I know. And so John and I finished the book. We had like, I think 150,000 words or 125,000, which is a lot. Yeah, you told me
that story. You had to drop it down to 100,000 words.
Yeah. Then they cut it to even more. I think we ended up around 80 or 90,000.
Wow.
But yeah, we were fortunate. I think the timing was right. That it was a solid book. We both felt that we had a really good piece of writing. We turned it into our agent in December 2019. and she was packaging this up, and then all of a sudden the pandemic hits, and we're like, oh shit, what just happened to us? Turns out it was an amazing time for publishers. Their sales were going crazy because people were stuck at home and just reading books. We ended up in a bidding war for the book. The editor that we liked best ended up being one of the top bidders. So we were super fortunate. I've been in a situation where I sold a book to a high bidder, but didn't like the editor, and it was a disaster. So that's a lesson learned there. I would take way less money in advance to work with a really good editor. But it just happened to be that Anne was one of the top bidders. So we went with her at Random House, which is Bantam Books, is their imprint. And yeah, it's been great. We sold the TV rights right away. Wow. To Peacock, which is NBC Universal's streaming network. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we go into production end of this year or beginning of next on the series. And John and I are just finishing up book 2. The other thing about Steel Fear, we had no intention of it becoming a series. Random House wanted a 2-book deal. I think they're like, Anne was smacking John and I across the face going, hey guys, this is how it works. You got something here. You got to make this into a series, and it's got to live on, because that's what they want. They want this, like when you look at the prolific fiction writers, like thriller, especially Stephen King, you've got, the Brad Thors of the world, David Baldacci, like they're all doing this book a year. And so she's like, hey, you guys you gotta get ready for this. This is going to be a journey. And so we naturally, without any spoilers, our main character, Finn, kind of continues on. And I would say he's very similar to like a Jack Reacher type of character, a little bit more flawed probably, but we have our own version of Reacher with Finn, no last name. And yeah, it's exciting. And it, I would say this, and then I'll shut up and let you ask more questions. People told me I was crazy to go away from nonfiction, because they're like, hey, you have a big fan base, keep doing nonfiction books. Even a close friend of mine, Mark at St. Martin's Press, was, in the beginning discouraging. When he read the material, he's like, okay, I get it now. But it just goes to show you, like, if you believe in something, it pays to see it through. And hey, not all the time it works out, but in this case, it did work out for John and I. We both got a record advance and a really good partner with Anne and Random House. So really happy with the Steel Fear.
Brandon, with the TV rights, how does that work? Like, I know you guys already multiple New York Times bestseller combined. You got probably 10 plus as a total. What kind of numbers are they looking at to start? Or can you get into 8-figure numbers making this movie deals with these big producers?
Yes and no. So typically how it works is, and look, Hollywood there is no like recipe. I think one of the recipes that works is we got, John and I also, I told John, I said, look, Paradigm is representing us. We have an amazing literary agent, Alyssa, but I had been unhappy with Paradigm's efforts based on John and I having tons of work, and them beyond licensing Red Circle in the beginning, which actually went on to be that show Navy SEALs on CBS, which is a whole nother story, because I
didn't know that. Wow.
Well, let's just put it this way. We sold our show to Nina, which was the number 2 at CBS.
Uh-huh.
They fired her. She'd been there for, I think, 20, 30 years. Mm-hmm. They fired her, scrapped all her projects. Mark Harmon was a friend and a partner on this Red Circle TV series. Mark got us our rights back, and then they ended up making that SEAL show, which is what we pitched in the first place. So we got nothing from it. And rather than sue and get nasty, I just I decided, you know what, let's just go on and make something else and learn from this. So um, so the typical recipe for selling something like a book to film or book to series is you want to get a good agent. So I told John, look, Paradigm on the film and TV side has done nothing for us. They talk a mean game, but it's, at the end of the day, it's about performance, right? People can talk all they want, but do the actions align with the words?
Absolutely.
So he's like, man, we just sold this book. Like, I don't want to upset things. I said, John, we got to do this. And so he's like, okay. So I called up Paradigm and I sent him an email. And I said, look, the film folks in LA, I said, you're out. Glad to keep the literary with Alyssa, but we're going to WME. And I got a really good agent at WME, which is William Morris Endeavor. So Hillary, our agent there, said, okay, guys, this is what we're going to do. We're going to find a good producer for you, a production partner, a good screenwriter. And we're going to take you, John, the producer, the screenwriter, and we're going to say, this is a package deal. And we're going to put the rights to Steal Fear out for a competitive bid process. So we ended up pulling in Ben Smith, who his production company, he did all the Jason Bourne movies and work with the Ludlam estate. Yeah. So Ben is an amazing guy and has an amazing team. So we got Ben, we got a screenwriter, Aaron Rabin, very, very great guy as well. And we went out to market and we had a ton of interest, like from guys from Michael Bay to a number of directors and studios. We ended up deciding to go with Peacock because I remember having lunch with Ben in Santa Monica. I was like, and look, I know when to keep my mouth shut and when I'm not an expert at something. And John and I both said, look, Ben, we're kind of relying on you to tell us what to do here. Like, we don't know this world that as well as you do. So if you tell us, hey, we should go with this group or this network, then that's gonna carry a lot of weight for us. And so Ben said we should go with Peacock. And I was like, why? Apple is interested. I love Apple's content. He said, look, Peacock they need good content. They're behind the curve. They're two big giants of entertainment. They have a ton of intellectual property in the archives, but they need really good content to kind of compete with HBO, Apple, Amazon, and all these Netflix and everyone else. And so he says that puts us in a good spot because we know we want to make a good show and that's the goal, and we want to get paid and we want the show to be made. We don't want it sitting on the shelf, which is what happened to me with the Red Circle. And so we ended up getting, typically how the deal structure, they give you an initial option. Then they have, I think we gave them 18 months or 24 months to actually go into production. If they fail to go into production, we get to keep the money, the original option money, which is six figures, and we can sell it again. If they go into production, it triggers another big payment, which is high six figures. And then as the series comes out, we get paid. John and I are both executive producers on the show, so we'll have a role in casting, some oversight on the screenwriting and stories and stuff like that. We get paid as EPs, and we get paid a royalty per episode.
Oh, that's awesome.
And as it goes, if it's successful, then I would say by season 2, we start getting, into that 7-figure zone. And as we build this franchise into something, with the Finn series, or look at the series like Ludlam did with Bourne, the Jason Bourne series, James Bond, you have Lee Chow with Jack Reacher. Once you get into that area where you're producing, John and I have 10 books under our belt, we've got a franchise, then you can start looking at kind of that next level, eight figures, and higher. But it takes a while, and it takes a lot of work. But that's I think the goal with John and I. We want to build this franchise that becomes, possibly $1 billion franchise. That would be the ultimate goal, right? But hey, would we be happy with the few hundred million franchise? Yeah, I'll take it.
That's funny. All right, yeah. Brandon. So we have a lot of questions. I know you're on a hard stop. So at the end of the hour, so I want to ask. Figure it's about 20 questions or so. If we stick to about 1 minute to 2 minutes each, we'll make it okay. All right. So first thing I want to do, I want to give you a play on your steel fear, and I also want to again thank you for coming here because I really appreciate you being here. And a lot of people don't know this other side of me, but I know I talk about finance and stuff. But my last book, The Survival of the Richest, I actually see survival in a lot of things that you do. And this is what I teach, which makes me very different. Finance is an extension of survival. And everything you learn in survival is to manage your wealth at this moment, the present moment. But finance is to manage your wealth, not just now, but in the future, right? That's what planning and all that stuff comes into play. And that's exactly what it's talking about. So I got my last book's 500 plus pages. But anyway, there was 4 parts of my last book. My argument started with survival. It went into why finance is related. Then I went crazy with biology, and and then I summed it up how we can save the world. So the first part is relevant to you because I did one of the most exclusive overviews of survival. And I wish I met you before, heard of you before. I probably skimmed through your books, but I don't. Anyway, I have an extensive review, and if I revise that book, I certainly will put you in there. But a lot of your friends are in there. I think you said Marcus Luttrell and Chris Kyle. We're going to talk about him. So, folks, that I'm saying all this to make an explanation of why Brandon's here. He's an amazing entrepreneur. Plus, here's the other side of me that I like for you guys to see, the survival part. When you get to understand how someone like Brandon can survive the way he does and then come out of the situations that he was in and then become a successful business person, it helps to add credence to the arguments of how money is what I call one of the greatest survival tools for humanity. Absolutely. So let's talk about your book, Steel Fear here, folks. So you have a copy there, Brandon? We could take a quick snapshot. I don't know.
No, I don't have a copy.
Okay. All right, so folks, here is Steel Fear. It's his new book. You see John David Mann is on there, right? So both of them, it's a thriller. It's their first novel. So in maybe 30 seconds, can you give us a quick summary? I know you talked about it already, but just as a quick book summary, maybe 30 seconds.
Sure. So main plot, there's a killer on this aircraft carrier that's deployed to the Middle East and can't just pull over and bring the FBI on board. Like, they've got a serious situation. It takes some time to figure it out. The captain of the ship is not a very good leader. So you could teach a leadership course on Steel Fear as well. But it's this closed door murder mystery with 6,000 suspects. Nobody knows who did it. Our kind of hero of the story, at some point even suspects himself because he has memory loss issues. It's kind of if Agatha Christie and Tom Clancy wrote a book together, this is what it would look like.
All right, great. Thank you so much. And next question, I know you have, you talk a lot about mastering fear, right? So can you give me your conclusions of how do you master fear? Maybe 1 to 2 minutes.
Sure. So that was the last book John and I wrote, based off me teaching a very successful venture capitalist and author and best friend of mine, Kamal Ravikant, how to swim. But really, I taught him how to overcome his fear. And really, it boils down to when we get into the habit of confronting fear, because a lot of times the fear in our head is much worse than the actual event itself, whether it's flying an airplane, swimming, those types of things. We get in our head too much. But when you develop this system, which I teach in Mastering Fear, and make it a habit, fear, we all live with fear. I have fear, you have fear. It's just our approach to it that makes a difference. And I basically show you how to use fear as a motivational tool and a superpower in mastering fear. So that's what's the basics of the book.
Thank you, Brandon. That was awesome. All right, Brandon. So real quickly, maybe 30 seconds to a minute, can you tell us a little bit about Navy SEALs and what it takes to become one?
Sure. So Navy SEALs, founded by John F. Kennedy in 1962, I believe, because the U.S. military needed a maritime special operations unit. Our predecessors to Navy SEALs were the underwater demolition teams, which were blowing up, surveying beaches at night, blowing up obstacles so guys, the Marines, could land on D-Day, that kind of thing. But the SEAL community, the SEAL stands for Sea, Air, Land. We get dive training, parachute training, demolition training, but we really own the water. It's arguably the toughest special operations selection in the world. If you just take it on paper and look at the amount of time you have to go through, it's about 7 months just to get through selection. 90% failure rate, 220 in my class. We graduated 23 originals.
Wow, that is unbelievable. What's it take to become a SEAL?
If I had to look for one character trait in applicants, it would be, has this person been through adversity and developed tools to deal with adversity? Because it doesn't matter how talented you are, how many push-ups you can do. We've had Olympic athletes, sometimes professional athletes who are extremely gifted not get through training because they first time they've ever had to really deal with adversity in their life. And SEAL training is 7 months of adversity every minute of every day.
That's awesome. Thank you, Brandon. And that's a similar conclusion that I got studying a lot of similar people like yourself. Basically, your state of mind, how to deal with adversity. That's great. Thank you. What are your greatest successes as a Navy SEAL?
I think my greatest successes, really, if I pointed to one thing, it would be the amount of work I put into contributing to overhauling the SEAL sniper program. We had a mediocre program prior to 9/11, 2001, and we, myself and a group of cadre turned it into one of the best sniper programs in the world. And having the opportunity to be sniper course manager or the head instructor was definitely one of my proudest accomplishments in the SEAL teams.
That's awesome. Thank you, Brandon. And flip that on the other side. What are your greatest failures, or were your greatest failures as a Navy SEAL, if you had any?
When I look back at things that I wasn't proud of, I think there was a moment when, when I was a new guy and a little bit cocky, maybe drinking too much with the boys, making bad decisions. But other than that, I kept a pretty straight and narrow path. I had really good mentors in the SEAL teams, which I think you need that in any part of your life, whether you're a young person or an adult. It's always good to surround yourself with great people and mentors who are kind of, when you get to that Y in the road, like nudge you towards the right direction. But yeah, other than that, I can't think of I've got plenty of failures in my life, but in the SEAL teams, I can't think of anything that comes to light.
Thank you, Brandon. Okay, so I want to just pivot just a little bit. So I read Chris Kyle's book, The American Sniper. I have him listed several times in my Survival of the Richest book. It was just amazing timing with the way the Survival of the Richest came out. He had wrote the book and died a few months later. What were your experiences like with Chris Kyle, The American Sniper?
Look, Chris was a teammate of mine at SEAL Team 3. He was a new guy. When I just checked into the sniper program, he was just finishing up as a student, sniper student. Chris was just one of the guys. I don't I know today there are snipers with many more kills than Chris. I think what makes Chris special is he's humble. He has that kind of Texas swagger and humility about him. So I think it makes him a very charismatic, lovable guy, which he was. You know, and him and I were in the similar situation. We became much closer friends outside of serving because we had both written books. My book came out, I think, a month before his did, American Sniper.
Brandon, you froze up. Brandon, you there? Okay, great. I guys, audience, we just had a little tech glitch, so hopefully this is going to be the same video. I hope it's not too separate.
Cut it in there.
Yeah, we'll make it part 1 and part 2 if that happens. Right.
So I was saying, Chris Kyle and I became closer after serving because we'd both written books and we're dealing with a lot of intense feelings, a lot of teammates that have died, those serving on active duty. We both experienced a lot of professional jealousy. And like I was saying before, when you come from a former community, whether you're a doctor or a professional athlete, like from the NFL, you're not going to leave that part of your past behind. It's an accomplishment. And so Chris and I got pretty close. You know, we were going through a lot of the same issues, but yeah, just a really good guy and incredibly tragic the way he died. And that whole thing went down in Texas, which, you know, the whole story is extremely sad. The mom of his killer was a teacher at his kid's school and kind of kept leaning on Chris to go visit her son. And she sold a very different story. She said that her son had just been dealing with some minor PTSD, and when in reality, he had been hospitalized and arrested for threatening to kill her and her husband. So had Chris really known what he was getting into, I doubt he would have taken this guy to a shooting range to kind of, you know, blow off some steam and have a few beers afterwards. And the whole thing is tragic. And yeah, I'm incredibly sorry for his family's loss. And like many families in the war, it can sometimes rip families apart. And yeah, it's a tragic loss.
Thank you, Brandon. And actually, on that note, I just want to read something. So from the Survival of the Richest, chapter 8, I quoted Chris Kyle. Chris explains war from a veteran's perspective. I'm going to read this for you real quick and just get some commentary if you don't mind. The first time you shoot someone, he says, you get a little nervous. You think, can I really shoot this guy? Is it really okay? But after you kill your enemy, you see it's okay. You say, great. You do it again and again. You do it so the enemy won't kill you or your countrymen. You do it until there's no one left for you to kill. That's what war is. From Chris Kyle, the American Sniper, page 6. Is this an accurate description of the feelings a soldier accumulates when killing the enemy?
I think so. You know, my sniper experience was very different than Chris's. You know, he was in an urban environment of Iraq. My time in Afghanistan was on a lot of reconnaissance missions up in the mountains where you're glassing enemy positions and many times calling in bombs. I talk about this in the Red Circle. The first time we had dropped bombs on an enemy position, I could hear a child wailing in the distance, and because a lot of these Taliban and Al Qaeda fighters had taken their families with them, and you know, that's a tough moment to be in, especially when my son was born. I think a week after that, while I was in Afghanistan. But you realize, you know, look, war is hell. You're there to do a job, and you kind of, I think in the first part of Afghanistan, we had a very clear purpose, very clear mission, and I was, you know, focused on that mission. And once you get into that routine, like Chris describes, it's just, okay, this is my new job. I just gotta get business done. We talked about it on your show the other night, but it's unfortunate what Afghanistan turned into after that, which I think is a lesson on what happens when you have no clear strategy, no purpose, and weak leadership, especially in the top level of military, which they run off a lot of good leaders like General McChrystal. But I could go on a whole hour conversation on that. But yeah, I would agree with what Chris said.
Thank you, Brandon. I appreciate that. All right. So just to follow through, maybe quick 30 seconds, what are your observations of the long-term effects of killing other people, especially for the military? A lot of these people that have, they have this diagnosis for them when they come out, I'm not sure what it's PSD or
PTS, I think,
PTS,
is the common one now, post-traumatic stress.
Yeah.
Look, everybody deals with, or let me put it this way, nobody gets out of life unscathed. I think the problem we're going to have in America that's kind of bubbling to the surface now with the veteran community is that many of these men and women who have served in Afghanistan past 2003 really can't assign any purpose to the deployment. So they've been in terrible situations. They've killed people. They've saw people get killed. They've saw their friends get killed. And then they're coming back, maybe leaving the military going, what the hell was this all for? Especially seeing recently what unfolded with the debacle of the pullout of Afghanistan. And when you have no purpose, you have big problems. And that, look, I look at World War II as a terrible war, like extremely nasty war on multiple fronts in the Pacific theater, in European theater, ground warfare, troops, in contact, up close, dirty. Those veterans did terrible things, but they had purpose behind it. It was to get rid of this like evil of Hitler. And I think those guys came back and were largely adjusted because they could compartmentalize it because there was purpose behind it, which is, you and I think talked about Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning.
Yeah.
So that's with a lack of purpose, I think we have big problems. And that's why you're seeing this massive increase in veteran suicide. The Department of Veteran Affairs is a complete disaster in America. Your chances of committing suicide go up, I think, 15 percentage points if you enter into the VA medical system, because it's such a bureaucratic mess and nightmare. And they just would rather get you out of there and throw opiates at these veterans. And it's a total tragedy. And I don't think it can be fixed. It's so, pardon my French, fucked up that it just needs to go away. Like, I would just get rid of the whole thing. It's a huge drain on the taxpayers' money. It's such a mess that it's like trying to put an additional story on that Florida condo that collapsed. It's just, there's no point in it, right? What's the fucking point? So it just needs to go away, like demolish the thing and let veterans have private health care. But yeah, that's a whole nother topic for a different episode.
Brandon, no, I got 2 hours blocked off. If you want to talk, I'm okay. I just want to make sure you're okay. I'd love to talk about this stuff.
Speaking of that, I have to end this because I have to go I had scheduled all my VA appointments, which has taken me 3 years to get this medical appointments done at the VA. And that's why I'm like, I got a hard stop in an hour. So,
all right. So what do you got? About 11 minutes, I'm guessing, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right. Let's got a few questions on survival, and then we'll get into the business questions. That should be pretty quick. Let's figure about 30 seconds to a minute each.
Okay.
So easy question. All right. Why do you like to fly planes, especially solo? Maybe 30 seconds.
I ever since I was a young boy, I could remember. I think it's because I grew up watching X-Wing fighters, the Star Wars, Buck Rogers, Battlestar Galactica, like those guys all flew spaceships. I just became obsessed with flying.
I give you a lot of credit. You've conquered a fear that I'm still working on. You know, sitting in a plane is one thing, but flying it, that's something else. I give you a lot of credit for that, Brandon. All right, thank you. And next question: how could someone become a leader? Maybe 30 seconds or so.
I think you have to educate yourself and put yourself in situations where you are going to experience good leadership and bad leadership. Some of the best leadership lessons I learned was having really crappy bosses in the Navy. You know, not too many. Fortunately, I had a ton of great mentors and leaders, but you need to put yourself into those situations. And then you need to read and educate yourself from other people that you look up to and that have accomplished history of being a great leader.
Thank you, Brandon. Okay. This question I asked you on Friday night, if you can maybe summarize it in about 30 seconds, and you actually already mentioned it again. All politics aside, what are the consequences of the United States losing control of Afghanistan, and why is it strategically important, especially in relation to China possibly rebuilding that Silk Road thing?
Tough one to answer in 30 seconds.
I'll give it my best. I can come back to that if you want.
No, I would say, look, by pulling out of Afghanistan the way we did, and clearly we hadn't done a great job of building a solid infrastructure and government, that creates a situation in the world where we've done that a few times. We did it in Iraq with the Kurds who supported us in Gulf War I and Gulf War II. So we have this history of betraying our allies and people that we need on the ground. And so I think this lack of trust now that America has, like, how are people going to trust us the next time we're in a situation where we have to put ourselves in some type of conflict to protect democracy in the rest of the world? And that's a big problem when you see a country like China and the influence they're exerting in the rest of the world. And let me tell you this, when I was I was on a call for Steel Fear to make it into this TV series. They were asking us to change the element of the plot arc to remove Iran because they said Middle East is overplayed. Can you get something else? I said, yeah, China. Oh, we can't do China. They have too much money in Hollywood. So that shows you the amount of influence that China is exerting back home in America, not to mention TikTok, which the majority of the American kids are on, is owned by a Chinese state-backed company. So they're collecting data on all of our kids on TikTok. Like, no one's talking about that.
Brandon, can you pause for 1 second?
Yeah.
If they took Afghanistan over, let's say it became Chinese, right? They got Syria in the backhand, they get Pakistan, and now they can go right straight to the Mediterranean Sea. And basically everything that we've been working on for the past 1,000 years, if you go back to Marco Polo and all the great explorers, everything they did, which landed us here, right, to find a shortcut to China, right, from the Western world. Now they have that control in modern world. I mean, wouldn't that really be something else for them?
I think, yeah, I would think of it though as terms of regional influence, and they're exerting their philosophy and putting it on the region, and now we have zero American influence in that region. So that's the problem. You know, the problem with the Chinese is that they control a ton of resources in the world, Africa included. The gloves are off on cyber warfare, and they think long term. You know, I honestly, I was thinking about this the other night. I think that we would benefit from an 8-year presidential term as opposed to 4 years, because 4 years, by the third year or year 2.5, the president's not focused on anything else but getting reelected. So, China can take this long-term strategic view on the world, where American politics we're very short-sighted, and that could work in the 50s, 60s, 70s maybe, but not in the modern times when things change so rapidly with technology. like, think about that, because I was thinking we really need to think about how our political system is set up, including this like two-party duopoly. Like it makes me laugh to see these senators and congressmen grilling Zuckerberg over like having this monopoly when their own party has a duopoly. You have to be elected president, you have to belong to one or two parties. Like, it's impossible otherwise. And that's a big problem in America. It limits our diversity in candidates, and not always the best leader gets to be president, unfortunately. So I think we need massive overhaul in politics, healthcare, education in America.
Thank you, Brandon. I'm sorry to ask you such tough questions. You're doing so great to answer these questions so quickly. All right, I have two other questions. I'm going to come back to them. I want to just ask some finance questions that really shouldn't take you that long. They're pretty easy. First is, what are there any connections between what you've learned as a successful entrepreneur and that of a Navy SEAL? And maybe 30 seconds.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that probably be the two biggest that come to mind are execution. I know how to come up with a plan and execute it, as opposed to like planning and never pulling the trigger. And also adversity. Anytime you're especially in entrepreneurship, you're going to deal with adversity, and usually there's a ton of lessons and what I call gold in them hills. If you're in an adverse situation, there's always a lesson to be learned or some value to extract from that, and the ability to persevere through those times. That would be what I've learned.
Thank you, Brandon. Okay, what are your favorite financial books? Maybe 3 of them, if you have any.
I mean, honestly, one of the first financial books I read, which I think is so simple, it's brilliant, is the Rich Dad Poor Dad books. That changed my life. It got me into investing in real estate. Wait
a minute, that changed your life?
Yeah, from a
Wow.
financial knowledge point of view.
That's awesome.
Because I think, and you probably experienced this, very well educated people, doctors, lawyers, they're not financially literate. Mm-hmm. And so there's this like power that brokers have and financial advisors have over them. And what Rich Dad Poor Dad taught me was, hey, you need to manage your own finances. And it's not algebra, it's basic arithmetic, to read a balance sheet, a financial statement or a profit and loss statement. And it got me investing in real estate. And I gifted that book to my dad at a time when he was considering becoming a developer. And I think that helped him do a couple big projects that set him up for retirement later in life. So that would be a great, I love that first book just because it's so simple. By
the way, did you get any my copies? I sent the 3 copies to your
I think it's at my mail service, but I haven't put my hands on it yet, but I will. Let me see what else. I mean, there's a ton of books I've read, but as far as finance goes, that's one of the biggest that really set me on this path to learn how to manage my own finances. But a lot of that education has come from classes like business school. I went back to Harvard Business School, just finishing up a 2-year program at HBS for entrepreneurs, called the Owner President Program. That's been a huge value to me. But anyway, yeah, that I know we're short on time, but
no, that's great. Do we need money to survive?
Absolutely. Anybody that says money's not important probably doesn't have it. In America today, it's a key component to survive. Like, you cannot live a good life and a life of what I would call in safety without money, right? Like, if you're just making ends meet and you have like one of the earners in the family gets sick, you're in trouble right away. Like, the ship is sinking. So you really have to think about how to provide financial stability for yourself and your family. But I mean, look, a college education is extremely expensive in America. It's actually one of the reasons I'm sending all my kids to Europe to go to school. The healthcare, you're an ambulance trip away from a $50,000 healthcare bill. It doesn't matter how much you're insured. And so money is incredibly important to survival, and investing or building a business is incredibly important. And the sooner we teach our kids, I remember my son, Hunter, 17 years old. I said, you need to get a job for college because I'm not paying for you to gallivant around Europe. Or you can manage the self-storage business I just bought in Florida. And he says, okay, Dad, I'll do the self-storage. He's done everything, managed every component of that business, from customer service to auctioning off people's units that haven't paid rent, doing the taxes, setting up the website, everything. And he told me literally 2 months in, he's like, Dad, how come they don't teach us this stuff in school? And this is a kid that's like an artificial intelligence math major in college. He's no dummy, but he's like, why don't they teach us this in school? Which I think they should teach financial literacy in middle school. They should start teaching this too. Let's kind of get this entrepreneurship momentum back in America, that one time it was the greatest country to be an entrepreneur. But the financial literacy, I could talk for hours on that. Hugely important to survival.
And that's the next question, which basically should be pretty quick. Is finance necessary for everyone? So we said that we need money to survive, but is finance necessary?
Because people don't understand. They don't understand that financing your TV is a losing game. Financing your car is a losing game. Financing an asset that is cash flow positive, like my mini storage business or self-storage business, that's a good use of debt. The business services the debt with a profit. That's an asset. So teaching someone good debt versus bad debt, how compound interest works for them and against them, why credit cards are terrible to carry a balance on. This is stuff that people should not have to learn in their 30s, which is usually the case in America. People wake up and go, oh shit, I should start paying attention to this. And they realize they got preyed on by student loans in college and high interest debt. And it's just a disaster. And if they had, like my son is 19, starting a business, has no debt, he'll have, no college debt because we sent him to the UK. And tuition for one of the top schools is $25K a year. It should be taught probably even in elementary school, but they don't teach it. And I don't know why it isn't taught, but my kids learn. My daughter's 16, she has her own business, and her younger brother's right behind her.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%, Brandon. That's why I have Sharon Lechter, Rich Dad Poor Dad. She's my mentor, and we're basically on the same page fighting this fight. So
yeah, I didn't know that. Yeah, thank her for me.
She was the first person in this Dr. Finance Live podcast, the episode.
Nice.
So, all right, and 3 more questions left. How important is having a purpose in business? What is your purpose? Maybe 30 seconds.
I mean, my purpose is financial stability for my family, my kids. That would be the main purpose. And we talked about purpose earlier, so it's incredibly important.
It's important, right? Okay. And what would you like to accomplish in the next 10 years or so?
I would like to build this franchise that John and I are working on with the Fin series into something meaningful and lasting. And I would like to support my kids. I told my kids a few years ago, I said, your mom and I have been through a ton. I've been to war. Like, you're in a fortunate situation that, your job is to reach as high as possible. And if you fall flat on your face, we'll always be here for you. But your job is to go after it in a big way, whatever that is for you. It doesn't matter. We'll support you. But so that's important to me the next 10 years, just to be there for them.
Very, very good response. And the last question, what would you like to be your legacy to the world?
I honestly think if people look at me and say, wow, he contributed something positive to humanity, that's enough for me. Like being in the black in that regard, that's all I'm looking for.
All right, great. Thank you, Brandon. You did awesome today. Like seriously, I asked you such questions today, tough questions that put you on the spot. I mean, these are crazy and very important questions. Do you have time for the 2 bonus questions, or you want me to wrap it up? I'll leave it to you.
No, we can do it. We can go.
You sure?
Yeah, I'm dressed, so I'm good. I can throw it out.
All right, 2 bonus questions. So here we go. All right. After researching many of the greatest survivors and survivalists, some of my conclusions of the my Survival the Richest book was that here's purpose again. The purpose and the will to live were ranked as the highest of all survival essentials. Does your experience as a Navy SEAL confirm that? Now, I just want to qualify that you had already mentioned we had a great discussion about the purpose earlier for military people. But would you say, so purpose and the will to live, I rank them literally as the highest. I have all the survival essentials out there, from air being number 1 to sleep and all that stuff. But mental survival essentials, I call them. Purpose and will, absolutely top of the list.
I would agree with that 100%. And I mean, again, Viktor Frankl talks about it in his time in the concentration camp, Nazi concentration camp. He saw people that were more healthy than him lose the will to live because they had no purpose. They had no purpose to live. So you have to have something worth living for. That's just, I think proven over and over again. So I can't argue with those 2 points.
And one of my personal conclusions was I put the purpose higher than the will to live. And the reason for this, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brandon, because someone can have a purpose, right? Like that, I give them a lot of reason. Maybe they were loved. They have a lot of family members, but if they don't want to live, what good is all those purposes? What good is having someone love you if you just don't want to live? Like some people commit suicide. That, like, I experienced my best friend kill himself at 18, right? Like, why did he do that? We had all of us loved him. He had a purpose, but he just didn't want to live. So, I mean, what do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
It's tough. I think it's a little bit of the chicken and the egg. And who knows what was going through your friend's head, right? Because I think, again, a lot of people deal with stuff on the inside. They don't externalize it. So who knows? But I think both are incredibly important. So I would score them equally, but because I don't think you could have one without the other.
Yeah, that's true. They definitely are connected at many points. Thank you, Brandon. I appreciate it. Last bonus question. All right, here's a tough one here too. So the Survival of the Richest, chapter 11. I think this is a really interesting one. The irony of great survivors. That was the name of this chapter. I think you would love it, by the way. So I put a lot of people who survived, and ironically, the way they died it just didn't even make any sense. I talked about Geronimo, who fell off a wagon drunk. This is a guy who's survived being murdered attempts like 8 times or plus. There's several other people. Chris Kyle, I got him in here. I thought this was very cool the way he said this, because he summed up the chapter. I always seemed more vulnerable at home. After every deployment, something would happen to me. Usually during training, I broke a toe, a finger, all sorts of little injuries. Overseas on deployment in the war, I seemed invincible. From Chris Kyle, the American Sniper, page 95. Thoughts, and the thing I have here is masters of one environment, one situation. Does that necessarily translate to mastering environments of all situations?
I mean, I think that just shows you that different environments produce different outcomes. When you're in a different mindset and a different environment when you're in combat than you are at home, when you can kind of let your guard down a bit. But that's what comes to mind. Also, one of the greatest books and stories about leadership and survival is Endurance, about Ernest Shackleton's journey to the Antarctic. It's an incredible story of leadership and survival. I mean, I don't know if you read that book, but I would put that high on the list for your listeners for sure.
Oh, absolutely. I got to check.
It's incredible. Yeah, incredible story. Like, ship broke up, locked in the ice, and he was able to get everybody safely, through an incredible, arduous journey, but get everything everybody survived. I mean, they had to eat their dogs, the sled dogs. They had to eat. It was crazy, but what they went through was incredible.
Yeah, two of the big stories that I promote a lot is the Donner Party and Alive, which was the Uruguayan rugby team from 19.
Yeah, I know Nando Prado, the captain.
Nando Prado,
yeah. I met him in New York at
oh wow,
one of my YPO events. But great, incredible story of survival.
Thank you, Brandon. I appreciate again you coming here. So we're going to wrap it up. I'm going to leave the floor for you to say any last closing remarks, and then we'll close it down. So go ahead, Brandon. The floor is yours.
I'll just leave you with one of my favorite SEAL team quotes. The only easy day is yesterday.
Wow. I love that. I love it. All right. Thank you, Brandon. So, all right, we're going to close down, folks. So again, I want to thank you all. This is Dr. Anthony Criniti IV, the Dr. Finance Live podcast. We had our special guest, Brandon Webb. Brandon, where could they find out more information about you?
My website is brandontylerwebb.com. I'm on Instagram and Twitter, just at Brandon T. Webb.
That's right, folks. And we're going to post this podcast everywhere. And Brandon, hopefully, will reshare it to his many thousands of followers. All right. So if you want more information, it's this way: drfinance.info on the window. Check out my 3 books. Check out Brandon's book, especially his new one, Steal Fear. Get that book. It's awesome. And his many other books. Subscribe and follow to both of us, social media everywhere. Thanks again, Brandon. I appreciate it. And thank you again, folks. Have a nice day. See you on the next episode. Bye-bye now.